I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. And all will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. Dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Welcome, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. Today, I'm Clint Richardson, by the way. Yes, it is me, and thank you for all those that were concerned about the station being hacked, apparently, today. But I am at least, 2,000 miles away or so, so it didn't actually harm me in any way. But I do appreciate people, reaching out to see if I was okay personally. That was touching. Thank you. Today is, it's the 26th of February, and it is a Wednesday. Oh, for the next indefinite amount of Wednesdays, we are going to be doing another weekly guest, and we are going to be talking about something. We're going to go ahead and title these Wednesdays. We're going to title it Christian Remedy and Law, because that is Daniel's, or Christian name Daniel. That's his YouTube channel, actually. You're more than welcome to also go and look for that on YouTube. There's many, many, many videos up there explaining a lot of the legal aspects of the Bible and how to literally use the Bible and the teachings of Christ as literally a remedy in the law, if you will, using the concept of Jesus Christ, the character of Jesus Christ, as literally a remedy, or if you will, a surety, or could put a lot of different words there, in law, to escape the tyranny of man's law. And we've discussed this a few times about the quote-unquote vicar of Christ, the replacement of Christ on earth, which is what the Pope and the Queen and his bishops all claim to be. That said, welcome to the show, Daniel. Daniel, do we have you?
We have you. I'm here.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Welcome to the show.
Okay. Greetings, Clint.
I was just reading, you sent me a little bit of your background, and I see that you were raised with a German Catholic and a Scottish Protestant.
What a mix-up.
How funny is that?
I think that's pretty funny.
Yeah. I'm going to let you actually go over what happened, because, of course, you're referring to your life in basically two different sections. Basically the secular aspect of your life, and now this sort of new, well, if you will, free man type of life under Christ. So I want to stress today that we're not here to preach, that we are not here to convince you to join any religion whatsoever. In fact, we're really going to be here to try and make you understand that there is only one true religion, which is not something that you can go and become a member of or join a church to get some special benefit from. In fact, that's actually against Christ's teachings. So what we're really trying to do here is to explain over a series of sessions why is that true Christians have always been persecuted, because true Christians, according to the teachings of Christ, they abhor, they will not join or be a member or especially be a person of government or of a corporate church of government. This is very important because what we're going to be teaching are literally the translation, if you will, because the Bible is, of course, a testament or evidence of law. We're going to be teaching, or actually Daniel, I should say, is mostly going to be teaching his experiences and his path that he has walked to becoming what is one of the most persecuted people on earth, which are true Christians who will not subjugate themselves or become subjects of any church or government. This is, you can imagine why the megalomaniacs who claim to be God and rule in God's name would not want a true Christian to exist, and why, of course, they've been persecuted by the church, actually, because, of course, the church has always been part of government. So, Daniel, it's just here that you were in real estate management, had a couple businesses, maintenance businesses, and even had a nonprofit charity raising animals. And then you sort of stopped, kind of like myself, where I was about to make six figures in Hollywood. I kind of had a crisis of conscience. Well, it sounds like you had sort of a similar thing where you were making a lot of money and sort of stopped all of this secular activity, or the worship of mammon, if you will. What happened?
Well, I'd say pretty much I'd spent probably as much time as a man could spend in a day, I'd say, pursuing what I thought was success. I mean, everybody is probably looking for something that makes them happy. And I think I'd be lying if I didn't say at the time I felt that what I was doing, at least for the moment, seemed to be, in the temporal idea of money, bringing me some kind of satisfaction. But I think at one stage it just seemed to, I think, what people have experienced when they've probably reached all the things they could probably have ever attained. In other words, the best meals you can eat, the entertainment that's at your doorstep at any moment. You could pretty much pay for anything if you're generating a large amount of secular commerce into your bank account. But at one point you'll notice that most people kind of reach a kind of a spiritual void. There's something lacking. And I reached that myself, and I took a break from that world and kind of started to go down an idea. Well, I was doing secular for-profit businesses. So I was running regular, everything from corporations and small enterprises that were generating gain. And then I, not being satisfied, decided to go down a more of a natural way of life. And I started to go down the field of education into the outdoors and conservation, and the idea of educating children in indigenous wildlife of North America. And that lasted for a while. But then I kind of saw somewhat the craziness in the world of charity, because charity really isn't pure charity, even in the world of that we exist in, because basically pure charity is giving with no intent to receive. And I found out I had to give out these tax receipts. So I'd kind of gone down the research on that and found out that generally that was really contract law. All you're doing is lowering someone's bottom line of taxable liability for the money they make.
You're getting a few exemptions, basically. A few exemptions from the law, basically. And
they do that with religions, let alone just, times we think other charities are not really religions, but they seem to go into the same category in their direction, because people can become almost religiously focused on a lot of charities and support of them sometimes and running them. And so it almost seemed like a religion at the time when I was operating the charity. And I realized that basically you had to do a lot of convincing to have someone operate an amount of flow into your charity every year. And so it was a lot of what I consider to be soliciting for that money. And I said, that doesn't make any sense to me, to go out there having to convince and beg everybody just to, keep this thing functioning. So I kind of got out of that. I had done my research and found out that truly it was really fraud. It's just a legal way of saying we're doing a good thing by giving money to something for a good cause. But in reality, when you're getting a receipt back to lower your profits, your profitable tax line, to me that just seemed like nonsense. So
absolutely. Hey, Daniel, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned, folks. Corporation Nation.
First of all, let me take just a moment to thank you for allowing me back into your homes. If this is your first time with us, let me extend a personal invitation. Let's build a happy little cloud. Let's build some happy little trees. There are no limits here. You start out by believing here. This is your world. You're the creator. Find freedom on this canvas. Believe that you can do it. Because you can do it.
Here, the Corporation Nation. My guest today is Daniel. Daniel does not use his last name or what we call the Sir name because really that is, for all intents and purposes, the artificial corporate name. And therefore, I will certainly get into that and the concept of the name. So therefore, we're just calling Daniel by his by his Christian name and nothing else. And I'm following in your footsteps, and we'll probably be, going down this same road. I'll be nipping at your footsteps. I'm obviously not as advanced in you, and again, we're going to talk about the process and the remedy that's been going on in your life. So that brings us up into the mid about 2005 or so, where you discover, hey, this whole corporate scheme of making money and celebrating statutory law is really not where it's at. Nothing I can buy that's going to... you put it one way to me that really stuck in my head, and it was very biblical. And basically, you said that we're born naked, and and in nature, and when we die, we're going to die naked. We cannot take any of the status, of the artificiality of the corporate money and belongings with us at the end of our life. Those are not things that will be, transplantable if indeed there is this other, life after death. Really, that boils down to something that I also want to hit you up on, which is this concept of over and over in the Bible saying, do not respect persons. Do not take upon yourself a person. And, of course, that means a status that lifts you above anyone else, basically. In other words, stay in nature. So what happened now that you realized all this was a bad thing?
I woke up because there was a little bit of, legal change happening within what I was doing. I was doing a very, very simple educational program, raising animals. And because they were of a wild, indigenous nature, I found out that you can't do that in the world of man's artifice because in order to basically participate in there, you need a legal status. And I want people to understand there is a difference between your given name, God-given name, we've called it, Christian name. That's a grace name. That's not legal. So in man's world, that's illegal. In order for you to participate in money, you have to basically have a legal status, and therefore you require what the Romans used to call a fictio, which was like a family name, and it kind of adopted you into the Roman civil society as if you were a Roman citizen by birth, even though it's not true. And therefore, in reality, it designated you as a secular debtor. So I don't like putting, how would you put it, a tidal wave of thought on everybody out there, but the minute that you say surname, you are saying, I am a debtor.
So it's very similar to say, I don't know, the 14th Amendment?
I would say that if the people are doing their due diligence, you may wake up to facts that may be contrary to some of the fiction you exist in. What we call in law, when someone's using a fiction and trying to call it a fact, the lawyers call that factitious. It's just another word for trying to take something that looks pure in itself, a fact, which has to be real. In other words, it has to be free from error, free from anything that is not real. And so, therefore, you cannot have truth where there's fiction. There's even Latin maxims explaining that. So when you put the two together, it's not impossible because it would require your individual consent to join truth with fiction. So your real name or your original name, and I know you have a lot of listeners that may have access to a Noah Webster's reproduction of the 1828 dictionary that he did. And look under, when you're looking under surname, it'll say the name added to one's original name. So there's many dictionaries that will even comment that the surname is added to one's real name. Well, that would imply then that the name that's added to one's real name, being the surname being an additive or an additional name, it wouldn't be real. Therefore, it would have to be fiction. So that leads to what you were talking about under the idea of not accepting a person. What the scripture was mainly going at when I researched the words, it was, especially if you go into the book of Job, it says that we were not to accept flattering titles. And in the day I accept a man's person or a flattering title, my maker would take me away. Well, when we researched the Hebrew word dealing with title and a man's person, it said it was basically referring to a surname.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not supposed to accept the surname in order for my true maker to not abandon me.
And basically,
it's in a situation where what do you do when you know this?
Yeah, and that is the trick, because I've asked so many people who purport, especially here in Utah, where everybody purports to be Mormon and Christian, and I say, well, everything in your life, every aspect of everything you do in life is actually completely against or anti-Christ's teachings. Does that not bother you? I mean, when I say, it could be anything from money to personhood to, there's so many things. And when you actually put that in people's face and put it on the table and say, look, everything in your life is actually against even the most devout Christian who follows the doctrine of a church instead of the Bible or the teachings of Christ. It's a really interesting reaction. Mostly cognitive dissonance. It's almost always a cognitive, sort of denial, if you will, that I'm Christian for show, basically. But what you've done and what I'm in the process of understanding is that this is not something that you go into a building and some priest who pretends to act in God's name relieves you of all of your sin. Another word that actually has a legal terminology, sin was actually sin against government. And if you didn't pay your debts on time, you went to hell, which was the dungeons under the debt collector, the executor. So all of these words, in fact, have a totally different meaning than the fundamental meaning that's taught in these doctrines. They actually apply to law and to the king and to... So, the reaction is incredible when you actually confront someone and say, look, nothing you're doing in your life has anything to do with Christ's teachings. It's a really incredible thing. What you've done is quite the opposite. You've abandoned any secular or corporate church that has its own doctrine, which is absolutely against Christ's teachings, and you've actually started and walked the path, if you will, walked the walk of a true, if you will, Christian. And that's an amazing feat to me.
Well, it's been I would say it's been an enlightening journey for especially the last 8 years, not charging anybody for any thing that you do. In other words, you're truly out there in pure charity. And when I found out that the word secular meant godless,
yes,
that's where the concern came in the reality.
Well, and you could also, again, always when we're talking about God, we're talking about nature. God is everything, so you're literally outside of nature. We'll be back, folks.
He's a rebel and a runner. He's a signal turning green. He's a restless young romantic, wants to run the big machine. He's got a
Nation. I want to remind folks that, again, we are not here to sell a religion, to sell anything, to preach, to do anything except explain to folks that it is, only a fool, and I include myself from about 6, 7, 8 months ago, I include myself in the group that I am chastising right now. Only a fool does not recognize what the Bible is. We throw the Bible away with the bathwater, if you will. In other words, we demonize, as well we should. We demonize the corporate churches, the Catholic, the Protestants, the Jews, and everything in between. And unfortunately, that has been confused to represent what's actually in the Bible. I assure you that it does not. The doctrines of corporate churches are designed to take people away from what we are talking about today, which again is a legal concept. It is, belief aside, faith aside. Remember, faith in government is a financial instrument. It's not the faith of the Bible. Same within in a corporate church. They are corporations. That means that they are persons. And what does, how do you be free of such constraints, debt, obligations of these corporations? Well, corporations are persons. Okay? What does the Bible actually say? What does it say to be a free man without legal constraints? What does it say? It says, for there is no respecting of persons with God. Romans 2:11. Of a truth I perceive that God is no respecter of persons. Acts 10:34. We go on and on and on and on. What does that actually mean? Well, when you break it down, you go into the what's it called, the concordances and everything. You find that, and this really shocked me when I fully understood this. It literally means citizenship. It means that your corporate name, your fictitious person within a government or a church. Let me just make you understand this, Americans, because where more than in the United States of America do we see this pervasive, this state of artificial personhood, this citizenship, and we worship and turn our backs on everything taught in the Bible because we value our citizenship, our personhood so much, and yet that's completely against the teachings, right? Artificial status, that is what we cry. And we cry it as we justify, let's say, millions of kids killed in Iraq, pestilence and poverty within our own nation, 200,000 soldiers homeless on the street, children homeless. We say, we are special, we have citizenship, and therefore we can justify these things. We have a special status that puts us above everyone else in the world, and therefore we can kill everyone else in the world. What people in the world, think about this, folks, what people in the world consider themselves more privileged as persons or citizens of the state than us Americans, denying literally not others rights and privileges and benefits and things, even health care, medical care, without them, ironically, naturalizing into the country and becoming a citizen. We force people to become a person and leave their natural soul, if you will, by the ironic term of naturalizing, becoming a citizen. But think about it. I mean, nowhere in the world do people feel more or believe that they are more privileged because of their status, their personhood, their citizenship than in America. And that realization, above all else, probably makes me want to just back away from all of this. I'm sure that you had a similar revelation there, Daniel.
Yeah. When you start to examine it, I started to go through conscience issues because it appeared to participate in the society of man. I would have to deem upon myself to be, and I know this has been a very controversial thing, I think, on some of the shows that you've dealt with. And again, I'm not here preaching to anybody in the sense of you must do what I say or join some following. That is an individual choice. And I think we all have conscience and morals, and we know what's right and wrong. And I woke up one day, I think, with a clear understanding of what we're talking about. And I realized that in order to be part of a constituted nation, I had to go back. If I'm thinking in any way, I'm in the now trying to think, okay, not know, I'm thinking. And at that stage, could a Christian be a citizen or declare himself and consent, in a sense, to identify himself in the idea of I would say a citizen of the United States? Would he really be that in reality? Well, I realized that for one thing, the Bible was clear. It said what a true disciple was. And there were things that were identified in there. One was love. You would know his disciples by love. And I know that most of the nations we're talking about, if you say you're within the aggregate or the common participation within any country, and they go to war, well, then to an extent, we'd be participants in not peace, but war, because we know that Christ represented peace. He said, I leave you peace. He did not leave us wealth. He didn't leave his disciples wealth. He left them peace. So your Christian name is the Spirit of Peace, but the history of the surname was really brought into being by warring nations, such as Romans, being a civil name, and it meant you were a heathen, pagan unbeliever, and that you bared arms or you had an arma. So you had a coat of arms. And on these coat of arms, they had beasts to represent them, because only a beast would do such an act against his fellow man. So I'm going to, okay, did Christ bear arms? I said, no. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world, so I guess that removes all democracies, republics, anything that we see out there, because clearly God's kingdom is a theocracy, not a democracy. And I know that sounds offensive at times to a lot of, I would believe, sincere Christians out there throughout any country who thought that they could actually be a good Democratic or Republican, be peaceful, pay their taxes, and be within there. But Jesus said that you'd be separate. He says, be ye separate. Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. And therefore, it requires your individual consent to participate. So I thought, well, boy, a conscientious objector is someone who objects to war in any form. And I found out that a surname is a form of war. I said, well, then I would have to object to that and not carry that. And therefore, all I could do is abandon it, because I can't destroy it, but I can certainly abandon it and leave it behind. And I know I used it before, so I would not admit to the truth. The fact is I was a participant at one point in that. And so therefore, it started to reach me into levels of truth. And I said, let the rule book of the Bible, if I'm going to go down the role of being a Christian, then I better go to the book that deals with Christians and not to some other type of strategy, regulations that may have me violate my faith. Because we know that the nations that are out there, especially democracies, usually try to lead us to believe that you can believe in anything. But there's many things that are done in democracies that are completely contrary to the Bible. So I started to realize that my Christian belief, if I truly accepted it, it would cause me to separate, because Christians were considered set apart. They were not within.
They were outlaws.
So, was I going to be an enemy of the world? Well, it appears that James 4:4 said, friendship with the world is enmity with God. Therefore, he who makes himself a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. One legal translation actually worded that he who makes himself a friend of the world constitutes himself an enemy of God.
Very nice. All right, folks, stay with us. We'll be back with Daniel, the Christian Remedy in Law. I'm telling you guys, listen to this. This is it. Finally found it.
Scientists have been battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about. What the object is all about.
Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems in the form of energy. And then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like, what it feels like, and what it sounds like. It explodes into this enormous collage. And in this moment, we are perfect. We are whole, and we are beautiful.
It appears rather gruesome, wrinkles like a walnut, and with the consistency of mushrooms, like a walnut.
It is the most mysterious part of the human body, and yet it dominates the way we live our adult lives. It is the brain.
The brain. Welcome back, folks, to the Corporation Nation. Daniel is my guest, going by his Christian name only. I was just, you mentioned, Daniel, that, this word that is so misunderstood, and it's faith. Faith. You see, all of these words that are in the Bible, and all the words we practice and use every day in our conversational tones, of course, always have this dualistic legal meaning. This is why people who read the Bible, what we might call a fundamentalist, will actually take the Bible for what it appears to be in the language that's been basically dumbed down for. In other words, to take something at its face, as opposed to understanding that each of these words also have a legal meaning, and that this is sort of the, if you will, the code of the Bible, but you have to understand the foundation of that code. Therefore, you have to understand the concept that these are all legal terms. Now, when we go and we look up the word faith in legal terms, it's probity. Good faith is the very soul of contracts. It signifies confidence, belief, and the full faith and credit. Where have we heard that before? That ought to be given to the acts of a magistrate while acting within his jurisdiction. Wow. Full faith and credit ought to be given to the acts of a magistrate. Remember, folks, the governor of your state is a magistrate. He's acting ministerially. So we're not talking about just the courts. We're talking about full spectrum of government here. So when we say that we have faith, we better be very, very careful what we put that faith into. So when we go to other dictionaries, that was actually Bouvier's, the Dictionary Act. When we go to the 1828 that Daniel mentioned, Webster's, the assent of the mind to the truth of a proposition advanced by another, belief or probable evidence of any kind. See, we have a thing called faith and credit of the United States, and unfortunately, we, the people out here, are actually pledged as chattel for the faith, because that faith is actually a financial instrument in the United States. So what we're trying to, correct me if I'm wrong here, Daniel, but what we're trying to make people understand is that because this has a legal context, this word faith, Daniel, are you actually literally putting almost in a legal construct, you're putting your faith into this character called Jesus Christ as the remedy to the faith that is basically stolen from us and taken from us, sort of presented to us, that we have to actually rebut, which is the faith that we are considered faith, actually, or credit in the United States. I don't know if that makes sense. But this word is very important in the fact that it's a legal term, and that if your faith is in government or your faith is in the church, then your faith is not in Christ's teachings.
Good confession made before Pontius Pilate, who was the governor, was, "My kingdom is not of this world." So I go, if my disciples were of this world, they would have basically bared arms to protect him, as he said, but they didn't. So, though we know Peter made the mistake and had actually afflicted a wound on a Roman soldier, Jesus still healed that soldier to show that his kingdom was of peace. He was the Prince of Peace, not of war. Now, if I put faith in a legal government, well, I'm certainly, as a Christian, not getting that from the Scripture, because it said, do not put your faith in men. Do not put your faith in princes, according to Psalms. So therefore, if I did that, I'd be going contrary to the Bible. It says, put your faith in God. That I believe. But now, what is the God? Well, we have to be careful what the God is. It appears there could be a controversy on there, and I know that people at times, even here in Canada, will say that well, Her Majesty is basically defender of the faith. And I said, well, that's quite interesting, because defender of the faith was placed upon her by a pope.
Uh-huh.
And whether people want to believe or not, Christ came before the pope. And certainly, unfortunately, people's understanding of history could be a problem on that, but Christ did not need the pope to represent him. And unfortunately, because we see all the acts that have happened with religion throughout the history, under all these Roman derivatives for the last few thousand years, all we've seen is bloodshed and war, supposedly in the name of Christ.
In the name
that
of
was
Christ.
Not his message.
Well, to be clear and logical, what you're saying is the chicken, the chicken before the egg. Basically, what you're saying is that in logical order, the only thing that could have happened, because the Pope is acting as the replacement or vicar of Christ in the temporal realm, therefore Christ must have existed in the story, in the allegory, in the Bible, or in reality, must have existed before the Pope came along. So it's a requirement, actually. No matter what history would say, the logical order has to be the Christ figure, then the Pope, because the Pope could not be a replacement of the Christ figure unless the Christ figure existed. So again,
exactly.
Trying to make it logical.
With the Romans, I mean, they were professionals at fiction. They told stories of romance and war. Romance was a lie when you look at the true sense of what a romance is. You can go to dictionaries such as Samuel Johnson's Dictionary 1755 that will deal with the word romance and tell you it's a fiction. And so, unfortunately, women today across the globe will say they wanted a man to romance them, so they want a man to lie to them. If I go and tell them that, they go, "Oh my goodness, how can you tell me that?"
Are you saying that the romantic era of history was a lie?
Yes. And the fact that the Pope would be any representation of Christ would be a complete lie, because there is no indication that he has placed him in any position such as that. The Romans, of course, were there for war, and they conquered many peoples by force and bloodshed, and that's not a representation of peace. So therefore, they could not be representing the Prince of Peace. Now, defender of the faith that was placed upon the English monarchies, you have to actually understand that the English language has a little bit of a unfortunate flip side at times, and the word defend also means to deny. So if I bear arms and all these monarchies give you permission to your family arms, your arma, your Roman name, well then, if they're promoting armament and war and the idea of civil, which means pagan, which a lot of people are not aware of, well then they would be basically calling us to arms And arms basically is a war term, so therefore Jesus being the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, but representing bringing peace, but though we know in Scripture it said eventually he would actually call these nations together for a final war, the idea of where his disciples are until then were not participants in the nations he's going to fight against.
Well, it's so great that she's just said that, because I've been trying to find a way to explain what the civil law is and the fact that this country was created as a, if you will, a godless nation. And it's so hard. I mean, I could show quotes of the founding fathers that were, surely anti-Christian, but that just doesn't seem to do it. But when you say that the civil law is actually pagan, that makes perfect sense, because, of course, who created the civil law but the Catholic Church? It was to deal with laws and problems that had nothing to do with the ecclesiastical. So naturally, it's the opposite of religious. It's pagan. That makes perfect sense. We'll be back, folks. Stay tuned.
Don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
Welcome back, folks, to the second hour of the Corporation Nation. I'm Clint Richardson. My guest today is Daniel. Just Daniel. Just Christian name Daniel. That's it. That's all we need, really, in nature. Now, I guess we could, for those of you that still are thinking, oh, geez, not a show about religion. Let's put this another way, folks. Let's take The Matrix as an example. That brilliant and yet deceiving movie that I've been picking apart for over a year now and explaining how it applies to exactly what we're talking about. Unknowns to many people, and actually knows to many people, is the fact that The Matrix is actually has heavy Christian overtones. However, it was created by people who promote the opposite, who promote theosophy and New Age mumbo-jumbo, to hide that fact, actually. So if we think, and we go back to the Matrix, for those of you who are fans, you've got the main character who has both his Christian name, if you will, which would be Neo, and his corporate name that makes him stuck in this matrix of artificiality, the artificial person known as Anderson, right? But in his heart, he knows that he is a man. He knows that he is a natural being. But unfortunately, he's caught up in the matrix, which is basically the government, the church, and anything that basically forces him to have the artificiality, the status within that construct. So what does he do, folks? What does he do? How does he escape the matrix? It's exactly what we're telling you here, what the Bible says, without the New Age. It's exactly what it says. It says, what does he do? He goes and he finds, let's see, what's the order? First of all, who comes to his door? Oh, a girl. A girl named de jure. Well, the only de jure, as opposed to de facto government, the only real de jure type of governance is under the natural law. All right, so what does he do? He follows the white rabbit. What is the white rabbit? Well, it's de jure. He follows the de jure path. Really, that's the natural law. In all truth, that's what it is. Because any political law created by government or the church is going to harm the natural law, the natural rights of men under God. All right? Simple as that. He follows the white rabbit, down the de jure path, the path of nature, and he finds none other than Trinity. Trinity, mind, body, and soul. You could say Trinity, is the biblical version as well. Whatever you want to understand, he has a self-actualization, a self-realization that he's alive and that he's caught up in a corporate boondoggle called the Matrix, right? So he finds his mind, body, and soul, the Trinity. What happens then? He's let out of the Matrix and discovers that in real life, there's not all the flashy things. There's not all the things. In other words, he could not take the artificiality of the Matrix with him in his discovery of his self. Maybe that's a better way for the modern person to comprehend what is being said. This is exactly the same path we are talking about, but we always, of course, have to be careful in comparing things to Hollywood because we know who runs Hollywood. So just as a primer, as an example, maybe an easier to understand example, that's basically what we're talking about here. It's just a self-realization and learning the way to actually function. And what was he able to do after that? He was able to go into the Matrix, but not actually be a part of it. The agents couldn't find him. So it's exiting from commerce. It's exiting from citizenship to the Matrix, to the government. What do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, I watched the movie a few times. Not all of them, but I watched some of them. I did a little research into, as you did, in the background of the writers and the people involved in it, and know to an extent that you got to be careful when you're talking about Hollywood because it's almost like Hollywood. It's almost some kind of worshipped entertainment because we even call the people who act in it like stars, so we're actually turning them into gods in some way. And we know if you watch most of the the energy around a lot of the entertainment field, unfortunately, it puts on these people in a very, very uncomfortable position. Even when they wake up to all the reality of all the fame that they've achieved, they end up miserable, actually wishing that they didn't even have it at times because many times they can't even eat a meal without someone walking up to them and trying to get their ego graph.
Well, yeah, and this is the point, exactly what you say, because this is how it is when you read the Bible, and you discover these things for yourself. When you watch The Matrix, when I watched The Matrix when I was a youngin', I was like, holy crap, what just happened? What did I just see? What did I just read? Same thing with the Bible. Why is this not making sense to me? Why is there something that's drawing me to it, but I don't understand it? I've got to learn more to understand it. That's exactly how it is. And you have to go past the deceit that Hollywood creates. And Hollywood might as well be called the church. Yes.
Because, the Roman society was based on entertainment. And they spent a lot of time on entertainment in the arenas, even the entertainment to the point of actually killing what they considered to be people who were not part of their system, which were the Christians, because they were considered illegal. It was illegal to be a Christian. And then they legalized it. They legalized it later as long as you took on a state name, and then they kept truth with fiction mixed together, and then they said it's okay now we can control this.
So but it became a
because
status.
You pervert something and make it into that does not make it real.
So it became a status. It became a person, actually. It became an artificial
That's right.
status. Yeah.
He just said, look, we can't seem to destroy it. We keep on throwing these believers in Christ into the arenas, and they keep on growing in population, and we don't know what to do about it. So what we'll do is we will Romanize it. We'll give them a Roman name, and what we'll do is once they take the Roman name on, they've got what is called a public name, and public means tax. and I hope that people can understand this in the listenership right now, that there is a difference between private and public. Public is taxed. So if you're participating in the public, you're participating in agreeing to be involved in a accumulation of tax and royalties that go into a pool in some way. I'm not going to say it doesn't go in any other place, but it goes into a pool, and then in the theory, basically the populace is supposed to have a say on how it's used. But public is tax. And so you can only tax something that's on something that is not yours. And therefore, the public side of your name is that familia or fictio name or family name or arma name, which makes you now in the legal, which is opposite to grace. And so therefore, your graced situation just got flushed down the toilet, because to participate in an aggregate, you need to surrender all your private side in order to participate.
You must give over your faith.
You got it.
Stay tuned, folks. We'll be back.
Is this real, or is this rhyme? The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's a rhyme. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's a rhyme. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Ride goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. Up and down, round and round, and it's very loud. Don't worry, don't be afraid.
I'm very pleased so far with our little introduction of Daniel. And again, we're going to have Daniel. We're going to have him every Wednesday, and we're going to continue with Bert on Thursday. So we're booked for the next at least month or so, and we'll continue this as long as people like it or love it. And yeah, it's great. Well, did you have anything else? I mean, you know, I wanted to ask or have you tell people about the amount of time that you have put into this. Now, I am very new to this particular game. It's something that has really resonated with me because it's logical and reasonable. The first time I've ever looked at the Bible and I've said, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's actually real. It's not just some weird fictional thing that people go nuts and have wars over. It's actually it's a remedy in law. It's actually a way to be free because you're literally recognizing God, whether you believe. I mean, there's 7 billion people on this planet, and I'm sure there's 7 billion different interpretations of what God is. That's not the point. The point is that you're recognizing God over man, and therefore man can no longer claim to be God. That's really what this boils down to. In the end, that is everything. That statement right there, that is everything that we really need to get across, is that we are becoming a self-aware, and we're understanding that our place in the world, in nature, and becoming, men under God, basically, male and female, doesn't matter. So, tell us how long you've been doing this, and some of the studying. You know, how many hours of study have you done, and for that matter, how many documents have you produced that are actually going into the courts?
Going back, I think the wake up for me came when I had enough. And sometimes you have to realize that don't wait for God to tell you. You're supposed to be talking to Him to ask for Him to tell you. At least in my spiritual belief from the Bible. Those who were doing the right things were always in connection with Him. When you were a little lost, then you had to go talk to Him, and then you asked for Him to help you. So I just kind of went down a direction that I said, look, God, I'm blind. I don't know what's going on out there. It's a very controversial world. It appears that the world I'm in right now wants me to do things that are unconscionable, participate in something I don't believe in. I believe that I don't need to elect you to be God. You already are God. And therefore, I don't understand why I'd elect people to actually do what the Bible said don't trust in. So it doesn't make any sense to me. And then when I looked up the word constitute and I realized that it meant to make up, to pretend, to perform idolatry worship, then I realized, well, then the constitution of man's got to be self-worship, and I'm not going to be involved in that, so where do I go from there? So I chilled out, took the time, read as far as I can to bring myself into an understanding of what words meant. Words such as smart, I was told when I was growing up that smart meant you were going to be intelligent, but I found out that the Bible was clear. It said smart meant injury. And so I realized that I maybe did not know too much about the language I was speaking, and I took probably upwards of, since 2000 and I would say the late part of 2005 through to current and going forward, that every day I'm going to learn something, and it's probably to correct things that I didn't know, because if you're in something that's not right, it is your obligation to do due diligence. The law even requires people to do due diligence in the world of man. So God never made it any other way. He said basically for us to do due diligence, and the early Christians were not even believing everything that the apostles said, so they went into the scriptures and did due diligence and research to see if what they were being told was true. So when I realized that the surname is nothing more than a fraud, and I'm in there somehow, I've got to figure out how I'm going to get out. Because the Revelation prophecy in Revelation 18 said, come out or get out of her, divorce yourself of her. And I found out that the word her meant hireling, prostitute. And everything in the scripture was talking about a prostitute. And then it identified the unholy Roman Empire as the prostitute, and it appears that all the religions and all the constitutions of man have been derivatives of this. They try to escape, but they're still applying civil law and all the things that identify themselves as pagans. So again, place a pagan mark, a mark of the beast, on all your participants. And then it was just ridiculously obvious when I found out that even under an act that was identified even under the United States regarding the identification of the Social Security Program, it was Chapter 666, which identified the mark of the beast. And you can't make a good legal execution without doing that at 18, which is 3 times 6, which is 18. I know in the U.S. they do it at 21, but I believe that the British Code follows in first reign on that. So I just kind of woke up that I didn't really know a whole lot, and I needed to educate myself in order to stand before God in truth. And I knew that His Word was out there, probably 65 million copies of the Bible printed every year to make sure I've got God's Word, God's will. I could look at man's, but He's got 4 million laws and statutes. It's a lot easier just to read 10 commandments and realize that the most fulfilling one was to love your fellow man as yourself, so therefore you would never bring any harm to him. And I found out that harm has arms in it, and therefore I realized that the great war at the end was dealing with Armageddon, was dealing with arms. And I said, I think this is too many coincidences. I've got a problem here. I think I'm going to have to lay down my arms and return to my original allegiance, which was placed upon me and graced by Christ. So therefore, do I believe in the fiction of man, or do I walk in grace with Christ? And this is where the journey took me. I hope I wasn't too fast on that.
Brilliant. Not at all.
And I'm only talking from my heart here. I'm saying I understand that there could be people that could be very disturbed at times by some of the things that I may be saying because it's not comfortable in the world they're living in. But I'm more uncomfortable with the idea of who or what I could be identified with, because ID is not what people think it is. It's basically dealing with a description of who you are, it's dealing with a legal description. They call that a mark. The officer says marker number when he pulls you over. The German currency at one time was called the mark. A mark is a blemish. There are many things that could tell us that basically we are in a trouble when we have someone say, I want to run a make on you, which means they're running an identification of something artificial. I'm a make. I'm a GMC. No, they're making a make on your name, on that family name. They want to find out what make you are because they have no way to know who you are without that make or model. And therefore, dummy is described in Black's Law as an individual, which is defined as someone not a member of a family, who holds legal title for another, and another is a stranger according to Scripture.
Oh, sounds very familiar. Sounds like our entire system of law, doesn't it? We'll be back, folks. We'll be back.
Hi, neighbor. Welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Or maybe if I press this button. There are so many things to learn about in this world. And so many people who can help us learn. And so many people who can help us learn. Did you ever grow anything in the garden of your mind? You can grow ideas in the garden of your mind. It's good to be curious about many things. You can think about things and make believe. All you have to do is think.
Welcome back.
You can think about things and make believe. All you have to do is think.
That's actually the subject we're talking about. Because, really, Daniel, we kind of, like you were saying in that last segment, another good example of that is our identity is another word that could be used as our person, our identity. Of course, in identity theft, someone can take the assumption of our artificial person halfway across the world, and we're none the wiser until all of a sudden we get the bill. And interestingly, we are going around in this ridiculous contemplation that we must keep our credit score, this score that's given to us on how good of commercial beings we are. How much are we spending? And, am I using my credit card to get the miles to purchase this? And I mean, that's basically what we were trained like little trained monkeys to protect this so valuable little number, this little 3-digit number or whatever. That's called our credit score. Man, I had identity theft when I was still in Hollywood, and it changed my life because, one, it was an inside job. Every time I would get a new card from the bank, before I could use it, the bank was stealing my money. Someone in the bank was actually, after 8 ATM cards, we finally figured this out. Someone in the bank was actually, it was Bank of America, was actually doing it. And basically I had to rewrite my entire identity to give me a new bank account, give me money. It was horrible. And when you go through identity theft, you really want nothing else to do with the so-called credit score because you realize even that is a lot of crap. They do nothing to help you fix your credit score. And so I gave up on that. I have no idea what it is, and I will never look again at what my so-called credit score is because I don't give a damn. I will never try to get something that is not within my means. Period. End of story. So the credit score and the identity theft, identity concept of our identity is just another trap. It's something that we focus on instead of nature.
That's a pretty good assessment of it. I look at it that man's world is based on kind of like walking away from the supreme creator that the majority of the world, unfortunately, right now doesn't want to admit. They see such massive intelligence in the creation itself, but they will not give any credit to the creator. And therefore, they walk down a world because that would be evil, because to not give credit to where credit is due, we walk into an evil denying of who God is, and then we walk into a world that's quite opposite to that. And that would be a lie. That's a fiction. And I just call that imagination.
You know what?
That's the imagination of man, run by magi straits, who only penalize those who were involved in the imagination of an imagination name that was given to them after their true birth with their God-given name, and gave them an after-acquired property, which we call now income tax,
well, now
on a name that they're going to basically use.
I have to disagree with you here. Now, I think most people in America actually do worship the same God. It's even printed on the dollar bill. It says, "In God we trust." I mean,
concerned which one they're trusting in.
Yeah, think about it. I mean, what is coveted more than anything by both government and church? It's the very instrument that is the trust in God, right? I mean, isn't that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I would say that in sincerity, I think good people, and again, I hope that what we do in our dialogue together is based on the idea that we're not condemning people.
Oh.
We're trying to learn. And you can only learn by keeping your heart and your mind open and doing due diligence that's required, because it takes a little bit of effort. If we're on a wrong path, then we got to keep our mind open to truth. And if truth is brought before us in fact, then we can't deny that without results that are going to work against us. So when I realized that man's world is all based on something that is a pretended idea or a concept that does not have to do with reality, and so man's journey has gone down a really bad path. And unfortunately, if he doesn't realize what path he's on, he could end up on a trail leading to nowhere. And we want to walk in reality and know where our 2 feet are. And so when I went down the journey of language and understanding what the words meant, I realized why man's world uses the word smart, because it has the word art in it. And the word spiritual, in its true meaning, means without art, no artifice, truth, reality. So man's world works the other way, and then they have people controlling that to control people who do not have spirituality. And so I believe there's good spiritual people out there, and hopefully they're listening. And I hope that what we can do is bring them into an understanding that their current position is not based on the fact they're not good people. It's not because they don't have a good spirit in them and that they don't have a conscience. It's because they may be on a misled journey right now, or they may be in a haze of inaccurate, incorrect information that's leading them down a path that could lead them to not such a great end. So they need to look at the words. They need to know what's going on. And the Bible was very clear. It said that a good name was more valuable than gold. Well, maybe there's good spells, the gospel, and there's bad spells. Maybe we're containing an error, a blemish in our name, and we may have to understand that we have to do something with that in order to get out of this dilemma. But unfortunately, most people are caught up in a daily routine that's just sucking their soul, their spirit of some man-made invention that they're the spirit of, as long as they continue to consent to be part of it.
Very well
Just
spoken.
consider your God-given name a spirit of a very bad, by your own consent, invention into man's world of artifice through some very bad energy that says good can be bad when it chooses to be. Peaceful can be war as long as you believe that it's okay, as long as a man-made government tells you it's okay. But we know morally we can't do things that are wrong. We have to, stand our ground, be courageous, and walk in truth, not in fiction.
Try to stay away from the Orwellian doublespeak. Is that what you're saying? Try to stay away from the fact.
You can't be in grace and be in legal at the same time. And so what's happened is people have gone to the rationalization that they'll rationalize there's no way out, and therefore, well, how am I going to own something? And I'm going, well, why would you want to be an owner since God has always been the owner? We're his children. He basically is the landlord, not us. People should be offended by the fact of even using the term itself so easily in their language when they say, oh, I'm an investor and I put money into a property and now I'm the landlord. I'm going, oh, my goodness. Did you realize what you just said you were?
Hey,
we are not lands of this. We are not lords of this land. We are its children, and God is the maker, and he may be returning if you do not know the timing. And it may not be a good day if we look at the planet. And if I was a landlord right now and I look at the planet right now and I'm returning and I see the tenants, the way they've been treating the planet with all the pollution and all the destruction to it, it may not be a very good landlord eviction time.
Well, let me say this, too, for those that have been induced into and of course, there's a lot of truth to the concepts here. The ancient knowledge, that the Christ story is actually worship of the sun. Well, folks, that's great if you wanna believe that. That's fine. There's plenty of evidence out there to back that up. Unfortunately, a lot of it's written in theosophy and by some pretty questionable sources. But I will say this. As Daniel just alluded, if you're going to believe that, then you darn well better figure out what the heck the Antichrist is, if Christ is the sun. Yeah, there's a lot of danger there. No sun, no life. So we'll be back, folks. Stay with us. We'll take some calls then.
Quantitative easing, trade imbalances, recession, low GDP, nations close to collapsing, and subprime loans, foreclosed homes, and people's taxes spent to bail out too big to fail AAA banks again. Fear levels rising as the U.S. crash seems imminent, having smashed the debt ceiling of 14.
I want to thank my guest, Daniel. Again, Daniel's going to be with us every Wednesday until the...
until the audience wears out?
Or God's had enough and he swipes us off like flies. Let's take some calls, Daniel. I'm sure that we've, or you have sparked a lot of interest in people who I think are also mutually interested in this subject. Let's take Chris in Las Vegas. By the way, Chris, thank you for holding so long. I do appreciate that.
Well, good evening, Daniel and Clint.
Hi. Good evening.
Your provocative conversation regarding the word terms that we choose to use on a daily basis without knowing the truly secret meanings that are entrained within them speaks very dear to my heart, as apparently well as to Daniel's.
It's a conundrum, isn't it?
Well, you spoke earlier about the word term magistrate, which is why I really dialed in at first. And, of course, if we look at the etymology or the word foundations, beginning science of that word, and it has to read in polarity reversal, because most of the languages on earth read from right to left, not left to right. It's stratified as a magi or a magic man.
Yes.
A magistrate. And
the man has done his research.
Well, I've been spiritually compelled to do so, I think, as Daniel also has. When we're set on this path, even early on in life, I was directed in this direction, but I didn't know until later in life this was the path that I was to walk. And you're speaking about so many different things that have so many deep meanings. And our English, or English as we call it these days, English from angle, meaning bent or twisted, and ish, meaning man, from the ancient Hebrew, is a hodgepodge, a compilation of many different languages, effectually creating a new language of psychobabble, which is effectually the same thing that they spoke whenever the languages were confused at the Tower of Babel.
You know, then Babylon.
Precise.
That's great.
And
I said it. I say it a second time. The man has done his research.
Well, I say, when we start studying these words and looking for the hidden messages that are encrypted within them, for instance, the word cannibal being from Cain and Baal, or a cabal, an assembly of worshippers of Baal, the underpinnings of our language, many times we're speaking in demonic tongues without even knowing it.
Absolutely. There's a wonderful documentary series. It's about 4 hours long, and I got to tell you, probably one of the most deeply felt things I've ever watched, because there's not a lot of things that make me want to, like we're talking about, shed this sort of worldly stuff. But I watched a documentary series. It's called "They Sold Their Souls to Rock and Roll." And I will tell you something. When you see this, and it's on YouTube if you can find it for free, and it's 4 hours in 4 segments. When you see this, and you see all of these so-called rock stars actually admitting on camera or in writing that they literally take upon themselves a possession of some other entity, and that they literally go to the crossroads, sell their soul to the devil, whatever that means. And you see that every single one of them is absolutely miserable when they actually do. I mean, they're miserable. To hear Bob Dylan say, that he literally sold his soul to the devil, it's the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And to just to give credence to what you're saying, literally, they all say the same thing, and that is that, and I would have never believed this. Even in my sound career. I wouldn't have believed this until just now, and just understanding this is they all say the same thing. We're using music to subvert the children. We're using the music to literally get them to worship Satan. That is not my words. That is the words of everyone from U2 to the Beatles to Elvis Presley. I was shocked when I saw this documentary. Again, not my words, their words. Amazing stuff.
Well, Daniel and Clint, check this one out. And I've heard somebody else repeat this as one I've observed originally, I think. The sounds of silence, Simon & Garfunkel's song, were the sounds of Moloch and Hashatan, or Satan. Hello, darkness, my old friend, I've come to talk with you again. It was a very Illuminati-based song and very deep in its hidden meanings encrypted within, just like the words we use each day. We've been deceived. In fact, the word believe is based upon a lie in the middle of it.
That's right.
Well,
too, I mean, it's very difficult when you're dealing with a world that's all based on a pagan use of a name to overpower everybody, to entail their real estate to God, take it down another direction, turn it into a debtor from being a creditor. We end up down some real journeys that could end up with things. I had a hard time with that too in the music, because I am a musician by parts of my background also prior to getting into the secular world, in the money journeys I went down, but I tended to be more in the music field before that, and I know that I was affected by these bands.
Yes.
And when you
just remember, the first thing that the hospital does when they deliver a pagan child to the god of Moloch is they will say, so let's just use the generic term Smith as the child. They will actually say, they won't use the word child, they'll put baby from Babylon on the child, and then they'll put Smith baby on it, and they'll put a band on that child's wrist.
Yes, and when you don't claim the name, they take the name, they claim jump you, and they create a new identity for you, and they prey on your name.
And what that is, it's called in what really is going on there, your real birth name is your God-given name. The surname is after acquired pagan property that if you use it, you'll be taxed for it for blaspheming God, and we call that afterbirth.
Oh, that's actually...
And we know what happens in the afterbirth.
In Black's Law, that's actually called a sin tax.
You got it.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, thank you so much for the call. I'm trying to get one other call in here since people have been waiting as well. Let's take Fred in Michigan. Fred, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys, great program. King James, the parable of the talents, I think, is Matthew. Literally justifies, authorizes usury, which I find immensely disturbing. Also, Romans 13, when I surveyed area ministers, pastors, whatever, regarding what I deduce that it's implying Slavic or whatever worship, obedience, blind faith, trust in all government, because it says all higher powers are created, ordained by God. And then I asked these men, not one objected. And then I said, well, okay, so hundreds of thousands of people have been murdered in your name over the past decade, all because of this manufactured diabolical war on terror since 9/11. And I said, how do you reconcile that with...
Daniel, it's important to note here. It's important to note here that a lot of the times
he's got a really good, valid point, and I'm going to do my best to probably explain it without trying to act like I'm using legalese. So
well, we're gonna run out of time here in just a minute, but I guess the easy answer is, when the word God is used in the Bible, it doesn't always refer to God, but it refers to the landlord acting in God's name, which is the Pope King. I mean, isn't that the easiest answer?
Well, to be continued, because I think there's more to it.
Yeah, what we'll do, Clint, we'll talk. If we don't have the caller still on the line, and believe me, I'm not trying to cut off the caller, and I'm sure you're not either. Let's talk about it in the next the next segment, just so we can clarify.
Next segment is Wednesday. Next Wednesday. We are at the end of the show, folks. But tell you what, Fred, why don't you call back next Wednesday at the beginning of the show, and we'll take your question right. Just continue where we left off. Thanks for joining me today, Daniel, and we'll see you next Wednesday, folks. Tomorrow's Freeman Burt, and Friday, Tammy Pepperman will be joining us. Take care.